you very much for attending our first series of Lunch and Learn events that we hope will educate and engage the community in support of issues that impact children and families in the Quad Cities. For those less familiar with our group, I want to give you a brief introduction to Women United. We're a network of volunteers organized as part of United Way, whose focus is on helping kids get started on the path to success in school and in life. Over the past 8 years, we've raised millions of dollars that have directly impacted children in the region. We contributed $2.5 million towards building a state-of-the-art child care facility at the Y in downtown Davenport. We've hosted dozens of Born Learning Academies where 20 families attend 6 weeks of training sessions on how to be their kids' first and best teachers. We've also supported a texting campaign where 950 parents receive daily messages on turning everyday moments into learning experiences for their kids. And we've run dozens of book drives, school supply drives, and hygiene drives to make sure kids have what they need to get off and a good start and progress in school. As the Women United chair, I was aware of a child care shortage even before COVID. Today, the challenges faced by parents, employers, and providers related to child care has been compounded since the quarantine has hit. We want to today talk about what challenges exist and what each of us can do as donors and advocates to alleviate some of those barriers to quality, affordable, and available child care. Women United is focused on quality care because we know that learning that takes place in early childhood is fundamental in social, emotional, and intellectual development, and patterns of behavior that can affect lifelong functioning. We are excited to have with us today an absolute expert, yes, you are an expert, Marcy, in the child care field, Marcy Mendenhall. Marcy is the CEO of SAL Family and Community Services, which is the umbrella agency for Skip Along Child Development Services, Home Child Care Network, Child Care Resource of Midwestern Illinois, and Welcoming Center Open Door. Marcy advocates for children and families in the early childhood field in both Iowa and Illinois. She has been a member of Women United for 6 years and is a member of the Women United Advocacy Subcommittee. Marcy's going to walk through a PowerPoint, after which we'll invite you to join the discussion on what we can all do. You might want to jot down some questions and any ideas that may come into your head during Marcy's presentation. And we will do what we can to address those questions and concerns at the end of the presentation. So if you're all ready, I would like to introduce Marcy Mendenhall.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks. It's so great to see so many familiar faces. And Angie, welcome back from vacation. Everyone's here. It is just the social distancing has certainly been, for an extrovert, somewhat of a challenge for me. So it's certainly giving me a lot of positive energy to see so many great faces. So here's something you probably hear a lot. Can you see my screen yet? No, we don't want to see that part. Let's try again. We have, there we go. No, can you see my PowerPoint? Great, thank you. Between the word dynamic, can you see my screen, pivoting? These are all new words of COVID, right? All right, let me see here. There we go. Gotta move you guys up. There we go. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us on the first virtual Lunch and Learn. I first want to say thank you to United Way and Women United for hosting this. The United Way women have been complete advocates and supporters of the early care and education field for many years now. And as Amy said earlier, they have been part of the solution to address the workforce shortage, the child care slots shortage, and now really taking in all the COVID complications that we have. So I really do appreciate the time here today. I am here as an advocate for both Iowa and Illinois from the entire early care and education field. As you know, I'm the CEO of SAL Family Community Services. I'll speak specifically about some examples from Skip Along as well. Today's overview will be a PowerPoint presentation, and we're going to have some questions at the end. So as Amy said, we can either save your questions or you can put them in the chat box for later as well. I'm going to be really talking about early care and education, as that's the birth to 5 system, but also out of school time. So we're thinking about those school age children as we start doing remote learning as well. My presentation is mostly going to be focused on child care centers, but really do want to give a shout out and a highlight to all the quality homes that we have that are part of our early care and education and out of school time continuum. But today's presentation will be focused on child care centers. All right, so how did we get here? If anybody can remember back, it was only in March in which Illinois shut down and had a shelter in place. This meant that only essential workers could leave their home, and we had very limited time outside as we were going through the COVID crisis. You know, this meant that only essential workers were able to go to work. We had in Illinois emergency childcare that was enacted. And this really meant we had lower teacher-child ratio, lower group size, and you had to have an emergency preparedness plan. Majority of child care centers at that time in Illinois shut down. In Iowa, they lowered the class sizes down to 10 to make sure that our essential workers could go to work. We also are talking about on June 3rd, which was just a few months ago, that Illinois reopened. So as we talk about this, we are in a fast-moving project. It's continuing to develop. So what I'm presenting here today is what we know as of right here and now. That is at 11:35, and it could certainly change by this afternoon. As we look at our strategies for mitigation around COVID-19, here's a side-to-side comparison of Iowa and Illinois. You know, some of these pieces are coming in that are new to us. One piece would be this contact tracing. It's mandatory in Illinois to have temping happen, and also for your children and our staff. If at that point you're presenting any type of temperature, you're required to go home. In Iowa, they're having it optional and strongly encouraged. Early care and education has been a very highly regulated field because of our attendance to safety and care for young children. So we are continuing to frequently sanitize high-touch surfaces. In Illinois, we're mandatory to wipe down playground equipment to help in that mitigation strategies. Face coverings are required in Illinois over the age of 2 and for our adults, and it's also encouraged in Iowa. This is one of the pieces that we've been advocating back and forth around what's a COVID mitigation strategy in comparison to what's healthy and developmentally appropriate for children. So when you have a face mask on, it's very hard to develop speech, attachment, or attunement. You can't really see what I'm saying. So we are continuing to balance that strategy of how important it is to mitigate, but also what can we do in the best interest of needs for our children and our staff. Social distancing is also required in Illinois and certainly encouraged in Iowa. And we want to make sure that we limit the amount of visitors so that reduces that exposure in childcare settings. So that is also on the docket as one of the changes. When we look at the curriculum for children, and we know that meals are very important. It's time to build social skills. It's time to build social interaction, social emotional development. We could be talking about math. We could be talking about language. So having family style meals is certainly inherent to our development of children. Currently now we're having everything being plated, which lends itself to the mitigation strategy, but we're also looking at how that will impact children on the long term. As we look at the hygiene as well, as I said earlier, I think there's 21 steps to diaper a baby. So we are highly regulated. Hand washing is certainly inherent to everything we do. As we move on, one of the pieces that we're working through on both Iowa and Illinois is this class size or group size, not only for early care and education, birth through 5, but also our school age or out of school time. So the class sizes to help with the mitigation have been decreased depending on the age. And Illinois is saying we need 50 feet per square child, for 50 feet for each child. And that is great for the mitigation strategy, but when we're trying to really address the capacity issues that we have because of the reduction of the number of children we can take, it certainly has a challenge for us as an early care and education system. I mentioned the teacher-child ratio. This has also been reduced. We want to make sure in caring for those kids, that they have what they need. With the teacher-child ratio, Illinois, we have had some reductions as well. They've also inserted what we called stable classrooms. So it's a concept that children and the adults and the teachers that they have are together on a consistent basis. So which is a fabulous aspiration that we've always wanted to do. However, now it's being required. What that is, provides on the challenge that we're presenting with it, stable classrooms, is that we might have a parent who have an infant and a preschooler and a school age child come to us who are needing care. In pre-COVID days, we might have what we collapse a classroom. So we would have the capacity until we reach the teacher-child ratio to be able to have one teacher there. Due to stable classrooms and making sure that we have those clear boundaries, we may have to have staff who come in for those 3 classrooms where we normally would have just 1. Foot coverings, if you might not think about that, is a big deal in Illinois. We have to either have a change of shoes or foot coverings happening so that we don't bring anything in from the outside world. And both in Iowa and Illinois, if you are sick, you stay home, or if you start exhibiting symptoms, you stay home as well. One of these great decision trees that we've been looking at locally here is the Illinois Department of Public Health. This is our decision matrix on how we're making decisions on COVID. So if we have a positive test, if someone comes back who has exposure, someone has testing, evaluation, and they may be asymptomatic, this tool is helping us both. We're applying it to our Iowa side as well, but this tool is certainly helping us help make those hard decisions. And again, if you have not looked at Illinois or Iowa Department of Public Health on the COVID, I would recommend that you look at those websites because there are so many great examples and details about spread, mitigation, and also other strategies that would help you either as a parent or as a business leader. So part of the realities of this reduced capacity, whether that's in group size or teacher-child ratio, is that I'm demonstrating here from our skip-along campuses. Pre-COVID, we had about 720 slots on any given day. And during our COVID capacity, we have a 30% reduction. So we're only able to serve 499 children. So where are those other children going is the question. And that's why we're here today to talk more about it. The other realities and implications are due to a temper and a runner and having people doing more cleaning, there's increased operational costs. That's for our workforce. We have as I just said, we have an increased number of people. Due to COVID mitigation strategies, when someone is presenting with symptoms, the person is able to go home. So that does put the overtime requirements on other people because we're different in early care and education and out of school time. If you think about the traditional school classroom who has a teacher might be overseeing 25 to 30 children. And what we have is that teacher is responsible. But in early care and education, like an infant classroom may have 1 teacher to 4 children. But if one of those teachers falls ill or is symptomatic, we are still required to have that teacher-child ratio. So it has increased the overall overtime for early care and education sites. As Amy mentioned earlier, one of the pieces that we've been frustrated with over the last few years is a shortage of early care and education teachers and professionals. We are working hard in both Iowa and Illinois to have that addressed, but there has been a challenge with that as well. We have increased operational costs in cleaning supplies, PPE. With that revenue, with that income that I just demonstrated on the prior slide, is that we do have decreased revenues. So this is all kind of swirling around, creating more challenges for the early care and education and out of school time providers. And if it wasn't enough with that swirl, we also have local shortages and national shortages on infant toddler slots. So we do not have enough slots for infant toddlers right now. And that was also inherent with pre-COVID as well. Infant toddler slots are very expensive. As I said, it's 1 to 4 ratio. And we have a very limited classroom because we want to have that intentionality with those children who are learning and growing and attaching to the caregiver. With that, there is the shortages that we're facing as well. And part of what we've been kind of swirling around with our thought leaders is what are the best practices? The Chamber, United Way, Quad City Community Foundation, Doris and Victor Day, RDA providers are also, we're just looking, how do we access in the Quad Cities? You know, what are we doing with people having reduced capacity? What are families doing? What are businesses doing? How can we help create something that is nimble yet reaching the root cause of some of these challenges that parents are facing? The other challenge is really this philosophical piece around babysitting versus early care and education. It's really easy to have somebody watch your children. It's a whole different thing that we do in early care and education around that education continuum. Having children be kindergarten ready, making sure their social and emotional needs are developed, and making sure that they are able to become able to read at 3rd grade and ultimately graduate high school. And so when we talk about this in early care and education, it's really a 2-tiered process. Can I just remind everybody to mute their phones? Thanks. It's really a 2-tiered system. So early care and education right now is looking at the current children. So we're prepping those for kindergarten, sure they can read at 3rd grade and also graduate high school. But we're also prepping the next workforce. So as we look at that, it's that 2-tiered system that we're making sure that we're leaning further into early care and education rather than the concept of babysitting. And so when we talk about early care and education, we have such high quality standards and practices, whether that's through assessment, data, outcomes, and the continuum of the pieces that we're doing to maintain our quality pieces. We want to make sure that that is our baseline, that we hold strong there rather than have it erode into something else. What we're seeing both nationally and locally are pop-up childcare, which are able to address the immediate need. However, we want to encourage people to look at those quality levels of these sites to make sure that teachers are background checked, making sure that they are fingerprinted, making sure that they have the pieces that they need to move us along that kindergarten between just keeping kids safe and making sure that they are developing the way that they need to, especially during this COVID time. Nationally, we're seeing this concept of a one-room schoolhouse concept. It is based on, let's say an office is needing their workforce to come back. They might take their conference room and change that to an early care and education or out of school time piece that is meeting the immediate need of their staff, social distancing their children. If that is to happen here locally, I would just encourage people to make sure that the child has outside gross motor time, that they're making sure that they're having their healthy and nutritious meals, and also that they have not so much focus on their screen time. As mentioned earlier, our data tracking and outcomes are certainly essential to what we do, that we can demonstrate on an in-time basis of how a child is developing and prepping for kindergarten. There has been this national debate about, do we reopen or do we stay at home? Do child care centers close? Do schools close? What does that look like in our area? And we certainly are having some in-depth conversations about that. The other piece is early care and education and out of school time. Are they safe? We believe we are. And then in comparison to public school systems. Here locally, we're working really closely with our school districts to make sure that those children in out of school time are getting what they need. We're making sure that we can help them with getting on their portals and ensuring that they have what they need to be meeting the criteria for the school time. However, early care and education has been terribly underfunded. And so we're trying to scaffold our funding and also our teachers with what they need so that they can help support those children and families. Locally and nationally, we have women leaving the workforce. Out of our SAL Family Community Services, we've lost about 5% of our staff to families women who are working for us who are now going to stay home. This was a personal decision for them to go home and care for their children during these times of remote learning, rather than to send them to out of school time or early care and education center. And other piece that's on the horizon that we are always monitoring is Illinois increased the minimum wage July of 2020, and it will go up again another $1 in January. So as we're looking at all those complex pieces about operating costs and decreased revenues, that's something that we're looking forward to and addressing in the next few months. So as we look at our funding and our thought process partners, locally, we had the Quad Cities Disaster Fund, who came right out of the gate at COVID, disseminated many dollars to help address the immediate needs of COVID-19. United Way of the Quad Cities had their recent grant cycle as well, in which they had a separate funding piece for addressing the COVID needs. And that is also with our other funding partners of Moline Foundation, Day Foundation, and the Quad Cities Foundation. As I mentioned earlier, we have another thought group who is really trying to understand and understand the access issues that we're facing in the Quad Cities. There's the Community Safety Net of Social Services and Recovery that is looking at childcare as an access issue. And I have mentioned this before in other circles. There was a movie out maybe 10 years ago, as A Day Without Childcare. And what does that really look like, and how businesses function, how the workforce functions, are they able to get to work? COVID is kind of highlighting that as right now. And as terrible it is, we really are looking at those opportunities of how to work better and understand better of all the things that we do within the early care and education field. And so it's really heartwarming to be able to be engaged and have our community here in the Quad Cities really understand the importance of early care and education and out of school time for children. So if you are a parent or a business leader or someone who knows somebody who's looking for childcare, these are two free services, both in Iowa and Illinois, under Child Care Resource and Referral. We have the parent referral line that they can call in Iowa and in Illinois, or you can email them. They will help you find childcare that is either close to your work, close to your home. They will talk about a home-based or center-based. These are pieces that we really want to highlight during this time of crisis so that people are not just defaulting to what they know. Let's reach out to the subject matter experts here in our Child Care Resource and Referral to make sure that we can get children in those high qualities and safe spaces. In Illinois, we have our other funding leaders. We had childcare, emergency childcare stipends that help offset the cost of childcare. In Illinois, we had just recently restoration grants that came through the first funding of federal funds, and that was passed through the early care and education centers. In Iowa, there is the Volunteer Iowa that launched the Nonprofit Recovery Fund that we're some nonprofits able to access funding for. Federally, we had the First Families Corona Act. This provided that first level of funding for Illinois that they used for the restoration grants. In that, there is the emergency paid sick that highlights that if your child care center is closed or unavailable, that you're able to get emergency paid sick as well. There are two right now pending legislations between the HEALS Act, which would provide $15 billion for the child care industry, in addition to the Child Care Essential Act, which is a bipartisan effort that would put 50 billion with a B billion, which is really exciting that we're reaching that synergy and that tipping point that has been long overdue into investing in early care and education. Lastly, before I go, as this advocate, as anybody knows me, I am the 2020 Census Queen. Why is it so important? The census comes every 10 years, and on average, it's $1,500 per person per year. And for that 10-year period, it could cost, not counting this person, could cost $15,000. And we miss from a community of 1,000 people. That means $15 million will be lost. That is in Head Start grants, that is in child care block grants, that is in infrastructure for your buildings, bridges, roads. We're also looking at the food program for school districts as well. So we need your help, making sure that you yourself and people at your work, your neighbors, everyone is counted, because we need a fair and accurate count for to make sure that the Quad Cities is getting all the dollars that they need to help support, especially during the corona, but also post-corona as well. And early care, children birth to 5 are in a hard to count population, as the elderly, non-English speakers. We want to make sure all those people are counted. And I know you can reach out to the Doris and Victor Day Foundation, Bi-State Regional Commission, if you need help finding resources around this, or you can just go on to the website as well. So let's talk about this. Before, one of the solutions here as well, and I know Leslie can speak to this, is United Way text campaign. Again, this is a great resource that United Way women have been funding. They are, I get them on my phone. I don't even have little children, but they are great little snippets of what are some quick and essential things that you can do with your child that would be helpful during this time. And I find them very informative and helpful. And there's just that kind of punch in your arm of saying, okay, I can do this. I know parenting is hard, especially during a coronavirus, but let's get in this together and have some positivity. So let's see, what questions do you guys have for us? All right.
Let's open this up.
That's right.
Marcy, I'll go ahead and start. I'm Betsy from United Way. Talk to us a little bit about one of the things we're hearing is an increasing need, is the need for wraparound services as schools start to think about going back into session and their schedules are unpredictable. Talk about what the industry is doing to support wraparound services and where we might be able to assist that.
You bet. And that's one of the pieces that we're getting most of the calls on. Parents are now starting to panic about, what am I going to do with my child? I need to go back to work, or my work isn't going to allow me to work remote. And some parents really feel strongly that they're not capable at this point to be their child's teacher, and they need some more support as well. So what we're doing as a community is just continuing to reach out to our providers. How are we working together? What do they need to reopen? And I know we've got Dan McNeil on here from Spring Forward. Dan, do you want to speak to that as well? And Angie Kendall from Hand in Hand. Mm-hmm. Dan, do you want to go first?
Yeah, in regards to wraparound programs, so Spring Forward offers out of school time programs, and ours are a little bit different. We are traditionally 3 or 4 days a week, and we're focused on lifting learners up. So it's enrichment, but additional academic support. So we're not the Monday through Friday that a lot of our partner providers are. But I know in talking to Jerry Jones at the King Center, certainly something that we're considering, and Marcy, maybe he's talked to you about the grant that they submitted to expand. And I don't know if that's considered, what you framed as like pop-up childcare, but some of these organizations that are applying to just add services, is that?
Yeah, it is.
Does that fall under the pop-up childcare?
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
Right, we're just trying to meet the need. And,
yeah.
And with that, the caveat is, how can we provide high quality as well? If we think about these children as our future workforce, we don't want the exposure to be just 100% screen time when they would be in traditional in schools. How can we bring learning to them in maybe a non-traditional way? Maybe that's through one of the pieces about a COVID strategy is making sure children are more outside. So how can we do some partnering with park boards and other experts in the outdoor world, so that children can get what they need, and to also be holistically looking at what does non-traditional childcare need. So think about those families who are working second and third shift, and their children are still going to be in need of childcare during this time. Skip Along is working with both the Rock Island and the Moline School District on partnering with them about getting into the portals. We're getting in agreements with the parents so that we're able to work with them on their homework and making sure that things are taken care of on that way. They've agreed to coach us and kind of partner us with one of their teachers so that the learning can continue over this continuum and not be a barrier.
Well, and that's what we're looking at as far as adding support. So, you know, we don't, you know, childcare is not what we do, but that's what I've talked to the King Center about. And Marcy, we can talk offline. You know, we'd love to bring our staff and teachers to programs that may need supports. What I do see is the greatest challenge, as you identified, is staffing as one of the challenges. We employ teachers and paraeducators who will be committed during the day, whether we're online or blended, in either environment. But we've also used students in the teacher education program, and there are fewer available today. So that's the challenge we're seeing in coming in and supporting childcare programs right now.
And Dan, I think you allude to this, we have also a real fear factor of families, our staff who may be immune compromised or maybe be living with somebody who are not able to then go to work, and that then further complicates the workforce.
Last thing, can I just ask Marcy, the decision tree,
Yeah.
was that recently updated? Like,
Yes. Do you want me to send it to you?
ago?
Yeah,
And
it was.
This is going to get harder, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I think it's going to become more complex, and that's why this term of pivot and being dynamic is certainly part of it. But I think that's why we have these discussions here, so that we can share resources and be able to say, okay, what are you thinking about this? I know Davenport Schools just hired a whole COVID staff person. You know, what can we do as a region to have somebody besides our health departments who might be experts in this field? Angie, we're going to add something?
No, we're just in the same boat of providing care full days on non-school days. We're navigating the challenge right now because we serve children with disabilities and children typically developing. Any child on a waiver who has a disability who's getting care cannot get education time while they're waiver hours. So that's presenting a challenge to us because we are offering for our staff to work with children on e-learning, but then we have to separate children on waiver at that time so that they can access care, which just further increases our staffing need. But we do have some openings, and we are responding in the same way as our other partners, providing after-school care and school care on non-school days, and trying to adapt programming to meet the individual needs of all the kids.
Mm-hmm. Great. Are there other, yeah, go ahead, Betsy.
Marcy, I was going to follow up on the staffing question.
Yeah.
You know, there was a staffing challenge prior to COVID. And I know Illinois has addressed it in a sense by adding to the minimum wage. And so it might be easier to attract people into the field. We're lucky to have Iowa State Representative Cindy Winkler on the call today. Is there something the states could do to make the child care field more attractive, or to help raise that, both the profile and the wage base, to make it more of an important field? Because Lord knows the work of the child care providers is fundamental to how kids are developing.
Cindy, do you want to start with that?
Sure. Thank you. I think one of the things that I continue to work on, when the governor put her Future Ready Iowa program together, it allowed the community colleges to identify 5 occupations within their systems that were high need, high demand, that were regional. And many of the community colleges in Iowa identified childcare, their childcare programs. The problem is that the childcare programs, they set a wage limit on that and childcare doesn't make the $14 an hour. So after the fact, the governor said, well, if they don't make $14 an hour, they're not a part of any of the programming with Future Ready Iowa. Again, all of you know it is a chicken and an egg issue. We need to raise the wages, but we also need qualified staff. And in order to get the qualified staff, it's important that we allow those programs to be a part of the Future Ready Iowa programs within the state. And we seem to hit a roadblock with this as we continue to talk about it. Those programs also are not identified in any other vocational vocational funding program in regard to student scholarships. The Future Ready Iowa plan actually funds the student to take the coursework. So for those of you who aren't familiar with that, and it would be a huge incentive to have those childcare programs, and they are all a little different within the community colleges, but those childcare programs to be a part of Future Ready Iowa so that there is funding going to the students who are taking the coursework. So that's one of the initiatives. We can continue to have those conversations. When we shut down because of COVID and then came back in June, there were no quality conversations going on for the 2 weeks that we were back in what the budget should look like. The budget that was passed was all status quo. I understand the issues, I understand the time frame, but we need to initiate additional conversations with our elected officials to know that, so that they are very much aware of the issues. Gary Moore, State Representative Gary Moore, is the appropriations chair, and he is from the Bettendorf area. That might be a great conversation to have with Gary in regard to some programs that and some ways that he can leverage support within his caucus for the funding for childcare. But we tried. We hit some roadblocks, and we'll continue to try. We're not going to give up on that issue. And I don't know if there are any other questions, but that's where we are at this point.
And Betsy, I think there's this mental model that we need to de-link, that early care and education is somehow less than schools. It's less than what we would pay. I think in the latest piece, we would pay less than a plumber. You know, there's just not a high value on it. I know in the Quad Cities, it's certainly moving the needle on what we're going from daycare or babysitting to really embracing all we do in early care and education. So the history of this is that childcare really became out of TANF. And so we look at what was traditionally welfare moms. This is an easy job for people to get. However, we have matured and really changed what we're doing in early care and education. Much like it's been modeled over the nurses, they have changed their brand identity as well. We're trying to do that on both Iowa and Illinois, but on a national level, of really seeing us as competent thought leaders and subject matter experts on the development of children and families. There's so much research out there that demonstrates the return on investment for every dollar that you invest in early care and education. There is a $7 to $14 return on investment based on the future trajectory of those children. If we can stay in line with those pieces and those two federal acts can be processed, it really does then help glean a brighter future for us. And again, I think that's another opportunity that we have during COVID, is to really see this as we are essential services, we are essential workforce, and now let's match the pay to what we're doing as well.
I agree. That's an opportunity for those of us in the Women United Network to do some public education, that it's not babysitting, it's brain building.
Right.
And that we're also needing to do some advocacy and further calls to action at the state and local levels and at the federal level. What other questions do people have for our experts here?
Marcy, you use the word sometimes of opportunity, which is like the combination of a problem and an opportunity. So do you see like, and this was just kind of what you guys were talking about, but what are some opportunities that we can kind of launch out of this mess into a better future?
That's a great one, Matthew. And that wasn't even a plant, everybody. That was just Matt just asking that. You know, and so when we look at this as the total landscape of early care and education and out of school time, we're really looking at, you know, how do we fund our current and existing early care and education and out of school time? So instead of going to pop-up centers, let's make sure we're 100% in capacity of all of our slots. And then let's look at more of a maybe a public-private partnership. How do we have more scholarships going to children and their families who are made to have more money in their own pocket and be able to leverage those dollars? What are some of the local businesses? What can we do together to address this issue around childcare? They might have space. We might have children. How can we help and have those intentional conversations? And then really looking at outdoor preschool would certainly be a great example of what we could do as a community, and really looking at just tweaking what we're already doing and enhancing it. And again, the last piece I would say is for the public-private partnership, to have a high-quality center costs money. We pay our teachers better. We have BA level teachers. We have assessment, curriculum. All those things cost money. And right now we are focused between survival and this other end of the continuum of maintaining our high quality. And so I'd be looking for additional dollars to help offset or augment that during this time, because we know that the data is there and we're standing firm on the quality pieces as well.
Marcy, speaking to the offset of costs, are there immediate things that the Women United Network could assist centers with? You mentioned second pair of shoes, cleaning supplies, extra supplies.
Yeah.
Speak to that, because could we do quick hygiene drives, whatever it is?
I think I had a panic phone call to Carrie Abbott when we were closing in March. And one of the reasons we were considering closing is because we weren't having access to toilet paper or cleaning supplies. So all of those pieces, and then what did Carrie do? She comes and she has just a tremendous amount of stuff that was so helpful to us. Those hygiene drives are certainly not only helpful for the early care and education, but the school age. We're talking about diapers, we're talking about formula, extra pair of shoes, or even shoe boxes to help those children. And again, take into consideration maybe a middle class value system that we might have, you know, 1, 2, 20 pairs of shoes. That's not the case for every family and every child. So how can we help, you know, make sure that we have shoes that are available for children, so that they're not tracking in or not having to be having no shoes or be doctored as well. The hygiene drives are certainly imperative. And I would also say, once United Way has been awesome on sending out updates and around the legislation that has been part of the advocacy efforts, make sure that you're not only taking your time to make sure that you fill out the advocacy effort, but you're sharing that on your social media, you're sharing that with your families, you're sharing it at your workplace. The more people that can pass the knowledge that we need $50 billion in the Child Care Essential Act or in the HEAL Act for the $15 billion can be transformative, not only to our area, but every child across the nation.
I know we're getting close to the end of the time, but I'd still entertain more questions, and I'd certainly like to hear from Renee too. I know she's got thoughts on United Way's role in all this.
Betsy, this is Cindy. I just have a real quick comment to make. As with the advocacy, we need to make sure that child care providers are essential workers. Yes. They are not identified as essential workers. So individuals that have child care facilities, my daughter has a licensed child care facility in Bloomington, Illinois. She can't get the PPE that she needs because they are not essential workers. And in Illinois, the governor has given some access to PPE, but it runs out before they get it. And she has a small child care center. And so I understand, you know, how that all works with the numbers, but they are not essential workers, and we need to advocate for that standing so that they have access, and they have to have the resources, but they have to have the access.
Cindy, I'm going to connect you with April Berthume, who is the Director of Child Care Resource and Referral in Midwestern Illinois, and have her connect you to the CCR&R in Springfield. So part of the role of Child Care Resource and Referral is to help disseminate some of those pieces. And there was PPE, so I want to make sure that she's getting what she needs as well. So we'll connect you in April. I'll connect you two together. How else can we problem solve? What else do you guys have?
That's excellent. I would just add, thank you, Marcy, and all of the providers on the phone for all that they're doing during this really challenging time, but also you've always been doing this, so it really matters, and we understand that. And you know, it's a huge priority beyond United or Women United, United Way. We really are aligning a lot of resources behind addressing this issue, problem solving the issue, not just for current times, but going forward. You know, you think about the impact of COVID-19 on families. You know, even before COVID-19, we knew that about 1 out of every 3 family would have a challenge paying for 1 or more children to go through a quality care center. But you add COVID on top of this, right, and even middle income families are being challenged and needing help in ways that they've never thought that they were going to need help. Mm-hmm. So not only are we facing a challenge with access to child care services, then as people go back to work, how are they going to pay for the child care services? So we've also you know, set aside funds to help support scholarships to help families get back on their feet. But there's more that needs to be done in that area, and Women United is looking at how do we help problem solve and fill that gap as well. So I'm going to hand it back over to Betsy maybe to close us out, or if anybody else has any questions.
Yeah, I really am entertaining any other questions. We're so grateful for the expertise and the leadership that you brought to this today, Marcy, and the other providers too. We could not even begin to address the needs of families without you in this region. So we very much appreciate it. And to our elected official here, thank you also for your leadership and your commitment to helping us solve this at the state level. It's very helpful. I think we could say safely from Women United and United Way's perspective that you'll be hearing more from us in terms of calls to action, whether that is about advocacy or getting together a hygiene drive, or I'd be remiss if I didn't say asking you for funding for Women United. We support this directly, so we would appreciate your involvement in any of those.
Yes, I would like to thank you all for tuning in today. And I'm always the one that remembers a question I should have asked after I disconnect. So for those of you that may have a question, don't hesitate to reach out to United Way or Leslie Cook directly. Her email is lcook@unitedwayqc.com. If you look over in your group chat too, Leslie has put the information on how to sign up for the free text messages. I also get them, and I no longer have little kids at home, and they certainly are very insightful and lots of great ideas to do things with your kids or your grandkids or your neighborhood kids or anything like that. So thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
So thank you all for your time, and I hope that you'll tune into our next scheduled Lunch and Learn. So stay tuned for what that will be. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.